to consider the writings of Shoghi Effendi, reading the writings of Shoghi Effendi, understanding the writings of Shoghi Effendi, weighing what we can to extract all that he's put into them, into these wonderful statements that he's left for us to guide the Baha'is in their interpretation of the faith now through the whole of the Baha'i dispensation. Friends, we've been considering various aspects of the essential verities of the faith concerning the three central figures of the cause. And now we're beginning our studies, we had last week and so on, about the administrative order, which Shoghi Effendi identifies as the fourth period of the first 100 years of the history of the Baha'i faith. In God Passes By, he identifies from that this fourth period is from 1921 until 1944. And it's during this time when you have the birth of the administrative order, you have the beginning of the crystallization of those forces first revealed by the Bab and then greatly reinforced by the revelation of Baha'u'llah, that have infused into the world an energy and a power destined to provide the potentialities for the eventual. Now, Shoghi Effendi talks about in this period of the administrative order that the formative age has begun in 1921, and we are still in the formative age and its various phases and periods. And we are witnessing the crystallization of the forces of the revelation in the processes of the administrative order. Now, that these processes of the administrative order are many. I commend you to look in the writings and see where Shoghi Effendi identifies the process, this process, that process, and so on. I know in the Messages to Latin America, that book of the Messages of Latin America hasn't been greatly diffused, but you should all seek it out through the American Baha'i Publishing to find it. It's the collected letters of Shoghi Effendi to Latin America. It's the missing volume so far in the collected writings of the beloved guardian. And there he identifies, and in many other of his messages around the world, but there particularly I've noted that he identifies these processes with almost everything that's happened since the dawn of the formative age. For instance, the process of the election of local assemblies, the process of the expansion of the faith through pioneering and travel teaching, the process of the consolidation through itinerant teachers and programs of consolidation, through the publishing of Baha'i writings, through the establishment of local and national Baha'i funds, through the process of the institutions of both local teaching committees and national teaching committees, regional teaching committees. The process of the election and formation of national spiritual assemblies. All of these various things you could think of that have happened since 1921, Shoghi Effendi identifies with those forces released by the Bab and Baha'u'llah, which are compelling mankind towards these goals, towards the establishment of these fountains of the administration. And they incarnate, he says in one of his statements, he says, they incarnate the spirit of the faith. the cause of God and its administration have incarnated those live energies that the Bab and Baha'u'llah have released. So we're going to go back to the text of what we were studying. This is the review of the nature of the administrative order in God Passes By, in the fourth part of God Passes By, where Shoghi Effendi outlines this, the birth and rise of the administrative order of the faith. Let's go to the texts now. Sorry, it's not coming up here. I hope you can see these texts now. We finished last week by this statement: the last 23 years of the first Baha'i century, because he was writing in 1944, may thus be regarded as the initial stage of the formative period of the faith, an age of transition to be identified with the rise and establishment of the administrative order, upon which the institutions of the future Baha'i World Commonwealth must needs be ultimately erected in the Golden Age that must witness the consummation of the Baha'i dispensation. So this is all an organic process, and it all arises from the forces released by the Bab and Baha'u'llah. And Shoghi Effendi cautions us to never separate these periods of the faith one from the other and think of them as separate histories and so on, but that rather it's one continuous organic process that's bringing this into being. The age of transition between the heroic age of the faith and the golden age of the faith. And this formative age is exactly what its name is. It's the period in which the Baha'i administrative order and the institutions of the faith are forming, are appearing, are arising. And it's an embryonic period, and the administrative order, Shoghi Effendi identifies as the embryo of the world order. It's in the womb of the world. The world's unaware of it. It's hidden to a great extent. It's beginning to be more universally recognized and understood, but it's far from what it will be when the world order, the institutions of the world order begin to appear. And the institutions of the world order will be dependent on the entry of masses, the spiritualization of the masses through the impact of Baha'u'llah's revelation, through the recognition of Baha'u'llah by more and more people. Gradually, the Baha'i communities will grow and consolidate themselves where they become mighty magnets attracting the waiting masses of mankind, which have been infused with the same revelation, which has placed the possibilities of the administrative order in our midst. These same forces activate seeds within the souls of each of us. The potentiality is there, resting within the body of mankind and within successive generations of Baha'is that are coming into being, that will more and more incline inwardly and recognize, when they hear it, the truths of Baha'u'llah's revelation, which are the guide for the future of mankind. The World Commonwealth is a affiliation of a spiritual reality of a series of Baha'i states. As I understand it, it's the majority. When the majority of states become Baha'i states, that's when the Baha'i World Commonwealth comes into being. And this is to take place in the golden, one of the things that's to happen in the golden age of the faith. Now, the charter which called into being outlined the features and set in motion the processes of this administrative order. Now, it's important, I think, we read the Guardian, but he packs so much into the sentences, we have to look carefully. Sometimes I bulleted these, but not here. The charter which called into being, this charter calls the administrative order into being. It outlines its features, and it sets radiating from the charter, from the will and testament. It sets in motion the processes of the administrative order. These processes are all these various developments that I was referring to just earlier. This administrative order is none other than the will and testament of Abdu'l-Baha. His greatest legacy, the brightest emanation of his mind. Take note here, the brightest emanation of his mind, his will, and the mightiest instrument forged to ensure, the mightiest instrument forged by Abdu'l-Baha to ensure the continuity of the three ages which constitute the component parts of his father's dispensation. And this is the contribution of Shoghi Effendi, his interpretation in laying out the three ages for us. The covenant of Baha'u'llah had been instituted solely through the direct operation of his will and purpose. Baha'u'llah is the source of this covenant, which has placed Abdu'l-Baha at center stage after the passing of Baha'u'llah. The will and testament of Abdu'l-Baha, we have the will of Baha'u'llah and then the will of Abdu'l-Baha, on the other hand, may be regarded as the offspring resulting from that mystic intercourse between him who had generated the forces of a God-given faith and the one who had been made its sole interpreter and was recognized as its perfect exemplar. We can see in this the administrative order, the world order is the child of the covenant, and Baha'u'llah is its father, and Abdu'l-Baha its mother. And he talks about this mystic intercourse between Baha'u'llah, who generated the forces of a God-given faith, and Abdu'l-Baha, its sole interpreter and its perfect exemplar. Again, we have the phrase here now, the creative energies unleashed by the originator of the law of God in this age gave birth through their impact upon the mind of him who had been chosen as its unerring expounder to that instrument, administrative order, the vast implications of which the present generation, even after the lapse of 23 years, is still incapable of fully apprehending. You perhaps remember, friends, there's a letter from the Guardian. He said it may take a full 100 years of operation of the will and the instruments that it's created before we begin to get a glimpse of what it's all about. And even then, we're not sure. We're just coming up to the 100 years now, next year. This instrument, again, the administrative order, if we would correctly appraise it, no more be divorced from the one who provided the motivating impulse for its creation than from him who directly conceived it. The purpose of the author of the Baha'i revelation had, as already observed, been so thoroughly infused into the mind of Abdul Baha, and his spirit so profoundly impregnated his being, and their aims and motives been so completely blended, that to dissociate the doctrine laid down by the former from the supreme act associated with the mission of the latter, that is, the doctrine of Baha'u'llah from the supreme act and mission of Abdul Baha, would be tantamount to a repudiation of one of the most fundamental verities of the faith. So we're talking about fundamental verities. This is a very important one. We can't separate these two. And imagine that Abdul Baha was not under the complete inspiration and direction of the founder of the faith in the steps he has instituted in the will and testament itself, in the founding of the administration. So now Shoghi Effendi goes on to say, this is still God passes by, the administrative order which this historic document has established, it should be noted, is by virtue of its origin and character unique in the annals of the world's religious systems. Interesting declaration from the Guardian. He goes on to elaborate for us what he means by this. No prophet before Baha'u'llah, it can be confidently asserted, not even Muhammad, whose book clearly lays down the laws and ordinances of the Islamic dispensation, has established authoritatively and in writing anything comparable to the administrative order which the authorized interpreter of Baha'u'llah's teachings has instituted. An order, he goes on to explain, which by virtue of the administrative author has formulated the institutions he has established, and we're talking about Baha'u'llah here in both cases, and the right of interpretation with which he has invested its guardian in a manner unparalleled in any previous religion, safeguard from schism the faith from which it has sprung. We have, in a broad general way, you can say that Moses brought laws and teachings, particularly the Ten Commandments, and Christ adopted those, kept those, and added spiritual principles, the love of men for each other, the establishment of all the implications of the Gospels. Then, when Muhammad appeared, he revealed both laws and ordinances for Islam, and joined those principles, spiritual principles, to them. It has been left for Baha'u'llah, the consummation of the whole Adamic cycle, to reveal institutions to embody both the spirit of the laws of the past and the principles of the past, and his own vision of the future, his own establishment of where we're going, and setting us on the path in that direction through the institution of the covenant and then the child of the covenant, the administrative order. We're moving in a very unique way that was never established authoritatively in the past, nor in writing. To go on, nor is the principle governing its operation the administrative order, similar to that which underlies any system, whether theocratic or otherwise, which the minds of men have devised for the government of human institutions. Now, this is just a seed of something that will be discussed in more detail right here, and then in greater detail in the fourth section of the dispensation of Baha'u'llah, written by Shoghi Effendi, which we will come to shortly. Neither in theory nor in practice can the administrative order of the faith of Baha'u'llah be said to conform to any type of democratic government, to any system of autocracy, to any purely aristocratic order. Now here we have democracy, autocracy, and aristocracy as three of the orders that have prevailed at different times. And also Shoghi Effendi adds, or to any of the various theocracies of the past, whether Jewish, Christian, or Islamic, which mankind has witnessed in the past. Theocracy, rule by God. Now Shoghi Effendi says that we have a very modified one. We've got a theocracy in the faith. The faith, in a sense, is theocracy because it's a divine order, a divine administrative order, and a divine world order that it's leading to. He says it is a theocracy. It's government ruled by God. It has an authority very different from the kinds of governments that human beings have developed and established at different periods. Now Shoghi Effendi further explains, incorporates within its structure certain elements which are to be found in each of the three recognized forms of secular government, the ones just named, democracy, autocracy, and aristocracy. It has those elements, but devoid of the defects which each of them inherently possesses, and blends the salutary truths which each undoubtedly contains without vitiating in any way the integrity of the divine verities on which it is essentially founded. Lots to think about here. There's some bullet points. These are the points in the text that follow in the regular text. These are the elements. The hereditary authority which the guardian of the administrative order is called upon to exercise, and the right of the interpretation of the Holy Writ solely conferred upon him. The powers and prerogatives of the universal and the exclusive right to legislate on matters not explicitly revealed in the most holy book. This purposely to keep flexibility in the cause. The ordinance exempting its members, that is the House of Justice, from any responsibility to those whom they represent, and from the obligation to conform to their views, convictions, or sentiments. Those whom they represent is the whole Baha'i world through various stages of election. So you have the House of Justice being, its members being elected by the members of national assemblies throughout the world. But clearly and this is established in the text, its members are not responsible to those whom they represent, nor to conform to their views, convictions, or sentiments. The specific provisions requiring the free and democratic election by the mass of the faithful of the body that constitutes the sole legislative organ in the worldwide Baha'i community. These, then Shoghi Effendi points out to us, are among the features which combine to set apart the order identified with the revelation of Baha'u'llah from any of the existing systems of human government. Is the faith a democracy? No. Is the faith a socialism? Is it communism? Or Shoghi Effendi said none of these. But of the recognized forms of existing governments over the ages, you have seen above how certain features have been repeated, but they've been provided with safeguards that they don't become corrupt as these other systems, man-made systems, have always suffered those corruptions. Well, friends, I want to get back to the screen where I can see you. Here? Wow. Stop sharing. All right. A reprieve from printed text. Friends, the next thing we're going to do is now we're going to back into the dispensation, into this fourth section, which elaborates the points that we have seen in brief here from Shoghi Effendi. The dispensation had already elaborated them from his pen some 10 years earlier, before 1934. So if you permit me, I will go to the next stage of this. Let's see. Yep, I'm trying to get this up for you. Sorry.
Oh, just a second. You need to go.
There we are. I think that's, you've got it now.
Yep. Yes.
Right. Facing technical hurdles here. Zooming around the world, but it's easy enough, fast enough, but there's all these other factors to take into consideration. But I think it's important that you see these texts at the same time we're talking about them, because you've got the printed text. I'm sure you can find it online. You should go to it. You should have it. You should print it out and read it separate from these and see how all of the comments and emphasis that we're trying to make, how they fit in, and if you agree with them. Everybody has to study independently these writings of the faith. And it's good to have classes and discussions of them as well, to help reveal different aspects of what people understand by them. Look, Shoghi Effendi, he starts off, dearly beloved brethren in Abdul Baha. With the ascension of Baha'u'llah, the day star of divine guidance, which as foretold by Sheikh Ahmad and Sayyid Kazem, had risen, and while pursuing its westward course, had mounted its zenith in Adrianople, had finally sunk below the horizon of Akka, never to rise again ere the complete revolution of 1,000 years, which is the designated end for the dispensation of Baha'u'llah, the end of the Baha'i era, the first Baha'i era. How Baha'u'llah how Shoghi Effendi here conflates together the revelations, the day star of divine guidance, birth and appearance in Tehran, and from there mounting its zenith. We had the intimation of Baha'u'llah's mission in Tehran. We have his declaration of that mission in Baghdad. in 63. And then we have the proclamation of that mission, proclamation to the kings and rulers of the world once he was in Adrianople. Finally, then this guidance sets below the horizon of Akka, never to rise again ere the complete revolution of 1,000 years. According to this text that we've read before, that no less than 1,000 years before the next manifestation of God will appear. This setting of so effulgent an orb brought to a definite termination the period of divine revelation. And Shoghi Effendi calls this early period, which of course was from 1844 to 1921, the initial and most vitalizing stage in the Baha'i era. I'm sorry, I have misspoken myself. It shouldn't be 1921. It should be 1892 with the passing of Baha'u'llah. This was inaugurated by the Bab, culminating in Baha'u'llah, anticipated and extolled by the entire company of the prophets of this great prophetic cycle from Adam on. Anticipated and extolled. This is the consummation of everything that's happened since the dawn of our religious history. This period has, except for a short interval between the Bab's martyrdom and Baha'u'llah's shaking experience, Sayyid Shah of Tehran, been characterized by almost 50 years of continuous and progressive revelation. You combine the two missions of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, a period which by its duration and fecundity, duration is length and its richness, fecundity, must be regarded as unparalleled in of the world's spiritual history. We're into a very different arrangement here. Because of this being the day of the consummation, the day of maturity, the provisions for the guidance and growth of the cause and the consummation of the forces released by revelation crystallize processes and institutions which will carry the faith forward to the promise that's been made to all these prophets of the past of the coming of the kingdom of God on earth, the establishment of this great civilization that Baha'u'llah's implied. So duration is a period of both duration, the length, and fecundity, unparalleled. The passing of Abdu'l-Baha, on the other hand, marks the closing of the heroic and apostolic age of this same dispensation. That primitive period of our faith, the splendors of which can never be rivaled, much less be eclipsed by the magnificence that must needs distinguish the future victories of Baha'u'llah's revelation. Remember, we're in the dispensation now. For neither the achievements of institutions of the faith of Baha'u'llah, the Baha'is throughout the world, but the champion builders, particularly the American believers, nor the tumultuous triumphs which the heroes of the Golden Age will in coming days succeed in winning, can measure with or be included within the same category as the wondrous works associated with the names of those who have generated its very life and laid its pristine foundations, namely the three central figures of the cause. That first and creative age of the Baha'i era must, by its very nature, stand above and apart from the formative period into which we have entered and the golden age destined to succeed it. So we've got this initial heroic age of the faith, apostolic period of the faith, and then now we're into this formative period, this time of transition between all of the wonders that the heroic age of the faith, the divine forces of revelation that have instilled, infused into the world the capacity to attain these various other stages that we're witnessing now in their development. And friends, we should see in all of the various political and other changes and fluctuations aspects of the disintegration of the old world order so that a new one can be spread out in its stead, in its place. And far from involving ourselves in political matters, which would only paralyze us and abort whatever we could do to contribute to the birth and development of the administrative order and its institutions moving forward, it will just humbug us. We need to become the the face of the spiritual principles of the cause in our interactions with the administrative processes and services that we're performing. This would seem to be essential, and we stand as a party of spirituality in the world and represent this new impetus that the Bab and Baha'u'llah have introduced. The first and creative age of the Baha'i era must, by its very nature, stand above and apart from the formative period into which we have entered, and the golden age destined to succeed it. Friends, we know from all that's written here that the heroic age of the faith ended in 1921, and the formative period began in 1921. And we don't know when the golden age will appear because we're in the process of laying the groundwork so that it can appear. Abdul Baha incarnate, for which we can find no parallel whatsoever in any of the world's recognized religious systems, may be said to have closed the age to which he himself belonged, the one in which we are now laboring. What is this institution that he incarnates? I think we find it's the covenant of Baha'u'llah, with all of the implications of that. So much so that we don't find another religious figure in the past, neither Peter in Christianity nor the Imams, especially the Imam Ali in Islam. There's not written documents. There's not enough support to that it kept the covenant clear in the past. But that was because they were preliminary, preparatory stages in mankind's development. Now we needed a formal presentation of this, and that's exactly what the Master presents us with. It's the perpetual, the indissoluble link which the mind of him who is the mystery of God, the same mind that's Abdu'l-Bah's mind, has conceived in order to ensure the continuity of the three ages that constitute the component parts of the Baha'i dispensation. In no previous revelation have we had such a clear picture of where we're going. We don't know the timing to go there, but we know the various stages implied by the revelation and by the interpretations of Abdul Baha and the guardian of the faith. We know where it's going. The period in which the seed of the faith had been slowly germinating is thus, and that would be the germinating stages, the heroic age, as I understand it, is thus intertwined both with the one which must witness its efflorescence, that would be our formative period, will have finally yielded its golden fruit, the golden age, the Commonwealth, the bi-world Commonwealth, and the world, eventually the world civilization. Now he goes back to this same image that he uses. We're looking at, of course, this is the first time he mentions it, but he's mentioned it. We saw it stating that the creative energies released by the law of Baha'u'llah, permeating and evolving within the mind of Abdul Baha, have by their very impact and close interaction, creative energies by their impact and close interaction, given birth to an instrument, the administrative order, which may be viewed as the charter of the New World Order, which is at once the glory and the promise of this most great dispensation. Our friends, the charter of the New World Order, we know that we've seen now these references to the present day administrative order being the embryo of the New World Order. We must distinguish in our minds between the present day administrative order and the future world order. These are two different stages and two different realities, about as different between the child in the womb and the child after it's born. The same reality moving forward, but an entirely different phase and stage. Now we say more from the Guardian. He says, the will may thus be acclaimed as the inevitable offspring resulting from that mystic intercourse between him who communicated the generating influence of his divine purpose and the one who was its vehicle and chosen recipient. What a beautiful image he gives us to help consolidate our understanding of the singularity of the whole process of the revelation, the succession of the covenant, the establishment of the administrative order of the faith. Being the child of the covenant, the heir of the originator, and the interpreter of the law of God, the will and testament of Abdu'l-Baha can no more be divorced from him who supplied the original and motivating impulse than from the one who ultimately conceived it. He further elaborates this going on in the dispensation, in the fourth section of the dispensation. Baha'u'llah's inscrutable purpose, we must ever bear in mind, has been so thoroughly infused into the conduct of Abdu'l-Baha, been so closely wedded together, that the mere attempt to dissociate the teachings of the former from any system which the ideal exemplar of those same teachings has established would amount to a repudiation of one of the most sacred and basic truths of the faith. There were those in the early stages of the administrative development of the administrative order of this formative age that felt that the principles expressed in Abdu'l-Baha's will did not reflect the station and activities of Abdu'l-Baha as they understood it, and Shoghi Effendi was compelled to write in detail about this so that they could see the connections, which he has the eye, if you will, the divine eye of interpretation, could see in the writings and in the Will and Testament and its various provisions. The administrative order, which ever since Abdul Baha's ascension has evolved and is taking shape under our very eyes in no fewer than 40 countries of the world, now it's 180, may be considered as the framework of the will itself. The administrative order is the framework of the will, the inviolable stronghold wherein this newborn child is being nurtured and developed. This administrative order, as it expands and consolidates itself, will no doubt manifest the potentialities and reveal the full implications of this momentous document, this most remarkable expression of the will of one of the most remarkable figures of the dispensation of Baha'u'llah. I wanted to go back here. This administrative order will, as its parts, its organic institutions begin to function with efficiency and vigor, assert its claim and demonstrate its capacity to be regarded not only as the nuclear order destined to embrace in the fullness of time the whole of mankind. It should be noted in this connection that this administrative order is fundamentally different from anything that any prophet has previously established. Inasmuch as Baha'u'llah has himself revealed its principles, established its institutions, appointed the person to interpret his word, and conferred the necessary authority on the body designed to supplement and apply his legislative ordinances. Strength, its fundamental distinction, and the guarantee against disintegration and schism. Nowhere in the sacred scriptures of any of the world's religious systems, nor even in the writings of the inaugurator of the Babi dispensation, do we find any provisions establishing a covenant or providing for an administrative order that can compare in scope and authority with those that lie at the very basis of the Baha'i dispensation. This is our foundation, friends. As I to take as an instance two of the most widely diffused and outstanding among the world's recognized religions, anything to offer that can measure with or be regarded as equivalent to either the Book of Baha'u'llah's covenant, the covenant of Baha'u'llah, or to the will and testament of Abdul Baha? Does the text of either the Gospel or the Quran confer sufficient authority upon those leaders and councils that have claimed the right and assumed the function of interpreting the provisions of their sacred scriptures and of administering the affairs of their respective communities? They don't have a text, neither the Christians nor the Muslims, upon which they have developed their religious communities. In more detail, Shoghi Effendi then says, could Peter, the admitted chief of the apostles, or the Imam Ali, the cousin and legitimate successor of the Prophet, produce in support of the primacy with which both had been invested, written and explicit affirmations invested, could they produce written and explicit affirmations from Christ and Baha'u'llah that could have silenced those who, either among their contemporaries or in a later stage, have repudiated their authority, and by their action precipitated the schisms that persist until the present day? Think of the splits, long time splits between Catholicism and various Protestant movements, or between Shia and Sunni Islam. If there'd been written documents, if there'd been something of the nature then of what we have in the faith, through the institutions, through the laws, the institutions and authority vested in the institutions, they would have been in a different position in the past, but that was not the case. So we rejoice in the authority which our institutions have, firmly based on the writings of the founders of the cause. Where we may confidently ask in the recorded sayings of Jesus Christ, whether in the matter of succession or in the provision of a set of specific laws and clearly defined administrative ordinances, as distinguished from purely spiritual principles, which he did reveal, the detailed injunctions, laws, and warnings that abound in the authenticated utterances of both Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha. Can any passage of the Quran, which in respect to its legal code, its administrative and devotional ordinances marks already a notable advance over previous and more corrupted revelations, be construed as placing upon an unassailable basis the undoubted authority with which verbally and on several occasions invested his successor? Now, there's no time here to go, it's not a place to go into the details, but Muhammad made quite clear on several occasions that with such statements as I am the city of knowledge and Ali is its key, and for whoever I am master, then Ali is also their master, and so on. These are recognized, but it's still not clear enough that those that supported what they called the democratic development of Islam could be convinced that Ali should be the successor of Muhammad. Even he goes, now Shoghi Effendi says, can the author of the Babi dispensation, however much he may have succeeded to the provisions of the Persian Bayan in averting a schism as permanent and catastrophic as those that afflicted Christianity and Islam, because there were schisms, major schisms in Christianity and Islam, can he be said to have produced instruments for the safeguarding of his faith as definite and efficacious as those which must for all time preserve the unity of the organized followers of the faith of Baha'u'llah? Instruments, definite, efficacious, which for all time will preserve the unity of the organized followers of Baha'u'llah. We have this strong promise from the Guardian about the continuity of our unity. Shoghi Effendi has commented about that the covenant breaking, the schism possibilities in the faith have been from appointed positions. Mirza Yahya, who challenged Baha'u'llah as the manifestation of God, had been named nominally, not the successor, but the mouthpiece, if you will, the center of the guidance of the Bab, which we see had various reasons, but that failed. And then the we had the attack on the covenant of Baha'u'llah from Muhammad Ali, who had been named in the book of the covenant as the succeeding center of the faith after the passing of the master. Both of these failed. Shoghi Effendi said those failures prove the power of this covenant. Not just ordinary people challenged it, the people who were at the very center of the cause and should have recognized it and should have acclaimed it, challenged it. And yet that challenge was not successful in any way. And finally, he says, alone of all the revelations gone before it, this faith has, through explicit directions, the repeated warnings, the authenticated safeguards incorporated and elaborated in its teachings, succeeded in raising a structure which the bewildered followers let's see if I can bring this up for you. I want you to see this. Oh, come on. There we are. Alone of all the revelations gone before it, this faith has, through the explicit directions, repeated warnings, the authenticated safeguards incorporated and elaborated in its teachings, succeeding in raising a structure which the bewildered followers of bankrupt and broken creeds might well approach and critically examine, and seek, ere it is too late, the invulnerable security of its world-embracing shelter. Friends, I think our time is running out here. I want to get to the chats. We'll take up next week with the paragraph, no wonder that he who through the operation of his will has inaugurated so vast and unique an order, and so on. Taking a look at the chat section here. Yes, the new volume of the writings of the Guardian, the messages to Latin America, is called A Fire with the Vision. Thank you, Dawn. Question here. Do you have further insights on Shoghi Effendi saying the second Baha'i century would witness the first stirrings of that world order? No, this is quite promising that Shoghi Effendi has said this. And of course, we're now into the second Baha'i century, from 1944 on. Let's see what we may yet witness. What will determine the end of the formative age? We have various things that the Guardian said have to take place in the formative age, and some of them have already taken place. One was the promulgation of a Tabi'actas. There are a few places where he lists those things that have to happen in the formative age. But even if they all happen, we don't know whether that will end the formative age or not. That this will depend on the pronouncements of the House of Justice with regard to when they determine this. Organized followers and unorganized followers. Well,
That's where
I don't know who the unorganized followers are. The organized followers are those that recognize Baha'u'llah as the manifestation for this day. That is really what makes you a full follower of the faith of Baha'u'llah. And there's an interesting question which has nothing to do with the class about my favorite paintings from painters. I'll just leave that aside for the time being. Friends, I think that's it for this morning. Hope you have a lovely week, and I hope you will dip into these writings and read and reread these sections of the dispensation. It's so essential, and they help animate us, they help ground us, they help confirm us in our vision of the cause, and then because of that, our excitement to proclaim the faith and move it forward. Thank you all so much.